Would you be very surprised to see a terribly scared barefoot teenage girl in rumpled pajamas with dangling handcuffs on her arm and a piece of rope on her leg? I think so. The police at the station where she ran were also surprised. However, no one believed the girl's story about the events that had happened to her in the last 18 hours. Indeed, it is extremely rare for children to escape from serial killers on their own. Hello, Internet. It's with you again, and I am glad to welcome you to my channel. Here I tell various detective stories and stories that I would share if you and I went camping and sat around the campfire. Today we will talk about one young, but very brave and with extraordinary strength of spirit girl who managed to take control of her emotions, fear, anxiety, anger, resentment, and escape from the kidnapper. She fought to the end, because she could not allow the thought that another person could take her life. Moreover, the heroine saved not only herself. The girl helped other hostages who could become future victims of the kidnapper. Fill up the tea, detectives, we are waiting for another interesting case. 23rd, 2002, South Carolina. 15-year-old Heather's parents left town for a few days, and the whole house remained at her disposal. The girl immediately invites her best friend, Kara, to spend the night, with whom they agreed to go to the lake the next day. Waking up around noon, each called her mother to warn about the plans. None of the adults were against it. Heather was given only a few instructions. It was necessary to water the flowers behind the house and on the lawn in front of it. However, Heather wanted to take a shower so much that Kara took over watering the flowers. The girl didn't even change her clothes. She goes out barefoot, in pajamas, because she still, like her friend, has to take a shower before going to the lake. Watering the flowers behind the house, Kara moves to the lawn in front of him. With peripheral vision, the girl notices the car, but does not pay much attention to it, deciding that the car will just pass by. A couple of minutes later, the same car turns around and drives up to Heather's house. Kara turns off the watering hose and goes towards the guest to clarify what he needs. The driver, a man in his 30s, neatly dressed in jeans and a shirt and with a cap on his head, got out of the car, holding advertising brochures in his hand. The first thing the stranger asked was, "Did the parents think?" Kara, not suspecting anything, immediately admitted that the house was not hers, but a friend. Her parents were not there now. Then the friendly man handed the parachutes to the girl so that she would take them and then give them to mom and dad. Kara comes a little closer to the man, stretches out her hand for the booklets, and suddenly a gun barrel is put to the girl's neck, completely not worrying about passers-by and neighbors who could witness the abduction of a child in broad daylight. The man ordered Curry to quickly go to the car and sit in a pre-prepared plastic container, which was located in the back seat the car. The man made it clear that if the girl decided to scream, he would shoot her right here and now. Kara obeys and gets into the car. The girl knew perfectly well that if she resisted or contradicted a man, she would make him even more angry. Kara was shaking with fear, but mentally prepared for what lay ahead. After all, she understood that men don't kidnap teenage girls just like that. Lying in a closed container in the fetal position, Kara had already made the decision to escape at all costs. And for that, she had to wait for the right moment. However, one escape was clearly not enough. The kidnapper must be punished. Therefore, Curry needed to gather as much information as possible so that the police would have an accurate portrait of the criminal. This will help law enforcement officers to get on the right track faster and catch the kidnapper. Therefore, Kara decides to start memorizing every turn and stop in order to figure out how to return home later. But in the end, the girl got confused, but noticed other details. For example, the serial number of the container. She literally learned it by heart. Regarding her abductor, Kara also managed to find out something: the criminal's love for classic rock bands and red Marlboro cigarettes. After some time, the man stops the car on the side of the highway and opens the lid of the container. Unfortunately, he does this not in order to release the captive, but to tie her hands and feet with a rope, and put a gag in her mouth. There was not a soul around, but the man still does not miss the opportunity to remind Kara about the presence of a gun and that the criminal will use it immediately if he hears even a sound coming from her mouth. As soon as the kidnapper tied Kara up, he closed the lid of the container again and drove on. After a couple of minutes, the car stopped, and the girl realized that they were in place. Kara could clearly hear the voices of other people and the sounds of cars. It seemed such a tempting idea to start screaming, because the chance that someone would hear the girl's moans and be able to help was very great. Although another outcome was more likely. The kidnapper for such an outburst would have simply strangled Kara in the house and shot her, and this, as we know, was not part of our heroine's plans. The man takes the container in which Kara was lying and carries it somewhere. The girl keeps quiet, which completely suits the kidnapper. As it turns out, the man brought his victim directly to his home. The kidnapper rented apartments in a residential complex, where each house was connected to another, according to the type of townhouses. A couple of minutes after the man went inside, he removes the lid of the container. And now Kara sees where she is. The criminal removes the gag from her, frees her legs from the ropes, but leaves her hands tied. The apartment was small, uncomfortable, and cluttered. As pets, the man kept a guinea pig, a lizard, and a couple of small rodents. The next hours Cora spent in the kidnapper's house were terrible. The girl was sexually assaulted more than once, but she continued to endure everything steadfastly and be a good girl in the eyes of the criminal. Realizing the purpose for which she was abducted, she perceived violence as an inevitable fact. I am surprised by the tenacity of a 15-year-old teenage girl. Thanks to her strength, Kara kept herself in control, controlled her emotions and, most importantly, did not stop believing in the possibility of escape. At some point, the man offers the girl to eat, but Kara refuses. In return, she offers to help the kidnapper with something, such as cleaning. He accepts the offer and sends the girl to sweep the kitchen. As you understand, she did not offer it out of the kindness of her heart. While cleaning, Kara carefully examines the room. She tries to remember everything, from the magnets on the refrigerator to the names of the therapist and dentist of her abductor. And as soon as he cleans up, the man decides to arrange a mini-interrogation. He records all the answers in a notebook. The criminal is interested in the name of his prisoner, asks how old she is, and also learns the name of her mother and father. If a guy, whether she had ever been in a sexual relationship, Hara, without any hesitation, also asked him questions, thanks to which she found out that after the army the man started working in the US Navy, but was dismissed and transferred to the reserve. After the interrogation and cleaning, the kidnapper said that he needed to call, so he forced Carla to climb back into the container. He closed the lid and left to talk on the phone. In the container, the girl panicked. She began to suffocate. Having run to his prisoner, the criminal began to shout why she did not obey him, but when he saw Kara's condition, he calmed down. He did not close the lid again, provided that the girl would sit quietly. Even before the kidnapper's phone call, Kara realizes that he does not live alone, but with a woman. Hygiene items and cosmetics were placed in the bathroom, and the girl discovers long red hair on the comb. Most likely, the partner of the rapist does not even suspect which person she contacted and what is happening in the apartment in her absence. Before going to bed, the man turned on the evening news and during the viewing began to put moral pressure on Kara. After all, for a maniac, the very fact of abduction and physical torture was clearly not enough. He says, "Let's see if they miss you, if they are looking for you. Oh, look, there's no news about you. And all because no one needs you." About 11 hours had passed since the abduction, and of course, there was not a word about the disappearance in the local news. Kara was not impressed by this trick. The girl knew that there would be no news. After all, she was still considered a runaway, not a missing one. It is also worth mentioning an important point. The man, in addition to the violence committed against the girl, also drugged her, forced her to smoke marijuana and take Valium. However, even in this state, Kara managed to remain calm and clear-headed. Before going to bed, the man handcuffed the prisoner and attached them to a rope that was attached to the headboard of the bed. He also tied Kara's legs to the bed, so the position in which the girl had to somehow fall asleep, absolutely not disposed to sleep. However, the drugs did their job, and Kara dozed off. Around 7 in the morning, the girl wakes up from the snoring of the kidnapper. It was a chance for salvation. It is necessary to act as quickly and quietly as possible. One wrong step and even the smallest noise can lead to the death of Kara. Barely breathing, Kara unscrewed the bolt connecting the handcuffs and the rope, and with her freed hands slowly unfastened one of the handcuffs from her leg. Yes, now she can run away, but getting off the bed and not waking up the man lying next to her is not so easy. The girl jumped off the bed with one quiet and deft movement, and, fortunately for her, the sleeper did not even move. Kara tiptoes to the front door, which turns out to be filled with all sorts of junk. First, Kara rearranges the plastic container blocking her path, then quietly pushes the vacuum cleaner away. But, alas, that's not all. The most difficult thing remains. She was standing in front of the door and was well aware of the roar that would now resound throughout the small apartment. And only the dead wouldn't wake up with such a sound. But there was no other way out. Kara abruptly opened the heavy creaking door and immediately closed it behind her. And now she is already running from this terrible place further and further away from her death. Kara runs, but the thought of a possible shot in the back does not let her go. She doesn't know the surrounding area at all, and she didn't have time to look at it. Another turn, and Kara Robinson finally runs out to the road. There she notices a car in which two men get into. One of them is middle-aged, the other a little younger. Kara starts waving her arms so that they both notice her. The men stared at the girl in shock, not understanding what she wanted from them. Then Kara said in a breathless voice that she had been kidnapped, that she had managed to escape and now she urgently needed to go to the police station. The men agreed to let her down, but, unfortunately, in a state of some kind of shock from what they saw, they did not remember where the girl jumped out to them. Although this information would be very useful to the police. And now we have come to the moment from which this video began. Kara ran to the police station with a statement that she had just escaped from a scary man. Stunned police officers at first did not even believe her words. The costs of the work of law enforcement agencies are such that the police understood perfectly well. A very small percentage of children and teenagers manage to escape after kidnappings. Especially when children act completely alone. In The Participant, Kara told everything in great detail. Where she was abducted from, how, what the man looked like, what he did with her. The Richmond County Sheriff was amazed at the extent to which the girl controlled her emotions, that she was able to develop an escape plan and, no less surprisingly, carry it out. The police call Kara's mom, and on the other end of the phone, after the message that the girl is safe, he hears a deep exhalation and words of gratitude. Now there was no doubt about Kara's disappearance. Most likely, the girl really became a victim of the kidnapper. The police understand that the victim needs to be sent to the hospital for examination. But then, without the help of the girl, they will not be able to find the right apartment, the apartment of the suspect. Then the investigator asks Kara to go with them to the area from where those two. The sheriff has a glimmer of hope that the girls will still be able to remember what the house looks like from the outside. Kara remembered, as you remember, a lot of little things, such as magnets on the refrigerator, the names of doctors. But I didn't see the specific appearance of the captive's house. Therefore, there was nothing to remember. The sergeant, who went with the girl and the men from the parking lot, had no choice but to start going through all the apartments located in this residential complex. When suddenly the police noticed a man driving by on a golf cart. This man turned out to be none other than the manager of the residential complex. After listening to a detailed description of the suspect's portrait, his apartment, as well as the mentioned fact that he lives with a red-haired lady, the manager recognizes his guest and tells him where to look for him. However, approaching the apartment, the police were disappointed. There was no one inside. Most likely, the man woke up from the noise of the door and, realizing that his victim had escaped, he himself went on the run. The police had to return to the station for a search warrant, and Kara was sent to the hospital. Moreover, the girl's mother was already waiting for her. Kara herself was very disappointed when she found out that the apartment was empty. But she did not stop believing that the man would be caught and punished to the fullest extent of the law. While she was being examined and tested, law enforcement officers learned the name of the suspect. It was Richard Mark Evenetz. During the inspection of the apartment, investigators found evidence confirming his involvement not only in the abduction of Kara Robinson, but also other girls. Evenetz's locked box hid several creepy stories from the man's life. And now this information was in the hands of law enforcement. While some studied every millimeter of the suspect's apartment, others made inquiries about him, about his family, work, as well as cars, to which the men had access. Here's what the police managed to find out. Richard Mark Edward Evenetz was 38 years old. He lived with his second wife, 19-year-old Hope Marie Crowley, who was at Disney World at the time of Kara's abduction. Richard was born in Columbia, South Carolina. He was the only son and the oldest child in the family. He was close to his younger sisters Kristen and Jennifer. After graduating from high school, Richard worked for a couple of months as a manager at the Jiffy Lube store, and then joined the U.S. Navy, where he served as a sonar technician. While working in the Navy, he received medals for good behavior and achievement in the naval service, which is awarded for leadership. 8 years later, Richard was honorably discharged and transferred to the reserve. Colleagues described him as a calm, quiet guy who did not attract much attention to himself, but, nevertheless, enjoyed sympathy and respect. The neighbors also spoke only positively about the man, saying that Richard was always friendly and quiet. Based on this description, there is some kind of inconsistency, don't you think? Although we have talked a lot about cases where the criminal turned out to be a person on whom suspicion of murder, violence, or any other crimes would never have fallen. a kind of wolf in sheep's clothing. After serving in the Navy, the man returned to South Carolina and began working at enterprises that sold compressors and grinding equipment. There was not enough money, which caused quarrels with his wife, which eventually led to a divorce. Richard was left not only without a wife, but also without a home, because he could not pay the bills. Having filed for bankruptcy, his house was arrested, and the man had to move to a small one for that cheap apartment. There, the police found a locked box with a key, where newspaper clippings were lying, which reported the death of the girls. 16-year-old Sophie Silva and two Lisk sisters, 15-year-old Kristen and 12-year-old Katie. All the girls were abducted near their homes, and subsequently raped and killed. Their cases have been unsolved for a long time, but now the police have a new suspect. Richard's family was shocked and law enforcement officers got through to them. Parents and sisters could not imagine that their son and brother were capable of such a thing. Unfortunately, none of the family members knew Richard's whereabouts. However, 3 days later, the suspect's younger sister called the police station and revealed the place where the fugitive was hiding. Hiding from the police is a very difficult task, and for most violators of the law it is simply impossible. Apparently, realizing that there is no escape from the organs, Ivanets decided to confess his crimes to a loved one, namely his younger sister. He said he was involved in the death of a man, and then he added that he had actually committed more crimes than he could remember. The sister, of course, was shocked by such a statement. Before that, the whole family had hoped that some terrible mistake had just happened, and Richard wasn't really to blame for anything. After hearing such unexpected and monstrous confessions, the girl decided to tell the police everything. The person who committed the murder must be punished. Yes, even if the perpetrator turned out to be your loved one. The girl also gave the name of the motel where the Evan was hiding, and the number of his car. The motel was about 40 minutes from the police station, but there was little chance that the man would stay there. A team of police officers went after Richard, knowing that he would surely head south. He had nowhere else to go, and indeed, the man left the motel a few minutes before the arrival of the squad. Law enforcement officers followed him and noticed his car on the highway. Then the real chase began, just like in Hollywood action movies. Near Sarasota, Florida, a man was caught up, pulled out of a car, handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. There he would have confessed everything, and then a trial would have taken place, where he would have been convicted. This could be the perfect ending to this story, but, unfortunately, it happened a little differently. Yes, the police really managed to pin Ivanets' car, because he ran over the spikes. But they couldn't take the criminal. Richard took out a pistol, which Curry constantly threatened, and, putting the muzzle in his mouth, shot himself. When Curry was told about her abductor's suicide, she flew into a rage. All the time after the escape, the girl hoped that Richard would appear in court, and Kara would sit opposite and, looking him straight in the eyes, say everything she remembered in the apartment, and how this information helped the investigation. And most importantly, the girl dreamed of saying, "My abduction was your biggest mistake." Kara believed that his suicide was just an easy way to get away from punishment. But no trial took place, and the case of the abduction of Kara Robinson was closed. But the authorities brought up old unsolved cases that could be related to Richard Ivanets. Not only newspaper clippings prompted law enforcement officers to think that Richard was involved in the murders of other girls. The fact is that the same handcuffs in which Kara ran into the police were found on all 3 victims. In the trunk of the car, the kidnappers found Kristen's fingerprints, which in fact was simply incredible, since more than 5 years had passed since the girl's disappearance. Richard kidnapped Sophia from the yard of her parents' house in September of 1996. The decomposed body of the girl was found only a month later in a stream near the highway. In 1997, an Evan kidnapped Sterlisk. After the sexual assault, he strangled the girls and threw their bodies into the South Anna River. The bodies of the dead were found 5 days later. Presumably, there were several more abductions, rapes and murders of girls, in which Richard Ivanets was involved. They took place in the same state in the 94th and 95th years. Investigations are still being conducted. After learning about at least 3 more victims of Ivanets, Kara was not at all surprised. According to her, the maniac was absolutely calm, calculating and prepared like a real sulfur killer. Richard's perverse tendencies first manifested themselves in '87, when he was 23 and 24 years old. Then he was already working in the Navy, which is why he was constantly moving around the country. So, in January of the '87th in Orange Park, the same state of Florida, and Evan got naked and began to masturbate in front of a 15-year-old girl. Some sources say that the victim was also with her little sister. A month later, when Richard returned home, the guys were arrested. The man did not deny his guilt and received 3 years of probation. By the way, at the trial he confessed to his problem, called it arousal in the presence of minors. Allegedly, when he feels aroused, he begins to travel around the area, looking for girls of 18, 19 years of short stature, mostly brunettes. Let me remind you that his second wife was a girl just 19 years old, and I don't think this is just a coincidence. After Evanet's suicide, 2 Richland County Sheriff's deputies and an FBI agent formed a group that was searching for information about the serial killer's past. The law enforcement officers wanted to know everything Richard had been doing for the last 10 or 15 years. The members of the group gradually learned about all his movements between the states in search of connections with similar unsolved cases. For her help in solving the murders of Sophia and Liz's sisters, Kara received $150,000 as a reward and was able to meet with the families of the victims. According to her, it was one of the most important events in her life, because it was this meeting that made her realize the importance of what she had done. Sheriff Leon Lott of Richland County, who was investigating Kara's case, played a significant role in her later life. From the day the girl ran into the police station, he took her under his wing. The following summer, when Kara was looking for a side job, the sheriff invited her to his place. The girl immediately agreed, because in fact she was attracted to work in the police, and she knew that this way she could be useful to people. As a result, Kara spent a couple of years doing administrative work in the sheriff's department of Lott, and then, after graduating from high school, she enrolled in college as a teacher. However, the girl liked the work at the station so much that she decided to combine her 2 favorite directions. After graduating from college and the police academy, Kara became a security officer at the school and an investigator in Richmond County for cases of violence and sexual crimes against children. It's worth mentioning that Kara has never talked about a rather scary moment in her life. And she never considered herself a victim. You become a victim only when someone has taken something from you. Nothing was taken from me. I refuse to give this man such power. So it is now not at all determined by the events that happened to me then. At the academy where Kara studied, however, there was a curious incident. At the next couple, the teacher began to talk about the affairs of the Lisk sisters, Sophia Silva, and then moved on to the girl, who managed to avoid the same fate. At the end of the pair, Kara approached the teacher and said that she was the survivor. The woman then blushed all over, apologized, and then told about the incident to the entire leadership of the academy. And already at the graduation square they presented an award for courage and bravery. Now Kara does not work in the authorities. She left her position to raise 2 sons and defend the rights of victims of sexual violence in court. But that's not all. Kara actively gives interviews for news programs, YouTube channels, where she shares her story. And Kara also leads a TikTok. Actually, it was through him that I found out about her. In TikTok, Kara also talks about what happened, answers questions and gives advice on how to cope with trauma and how to help victims. Her goal is to give hope and encouragement to other girls who have faced violence in their lives. To remind them that they are not alone, they can heal and that they are much stronger than the events that have happened to them. And, by the way, quite recently, just last month, a documentary film based on this story was released. And it's called The One That Ran Away. The story of Kara Robbins. The girl herself took part in the filming, as she wanted to show what really happened to her for 18 long hours. It is equally important that Kara uses her experience gained over the years in law enforcement to speak to girls all over the country. One of the tasks is to help women see themselves in others, because I think it can be empowering when we just talk to someone who understands what we've been through. I would like to help them tell their stories in such a way that they can really take responsibility for everything that happened to them and regain power. Now Kara Robinson inspires other girls, women to believe in their strength and continue to live a happy, fulfilled life. And not to remain in the position of the victim, who all they do is regret. Speaking of pity, in one of her interviews, Kara says that she does not like it when people, after hearing the abduction and violence, begin to express words of sympathy or regret. Some even begin to apologize. She believes that it is much more important for people who have experienced such events to hear encouraging words, because they give strength and help to cope with trauma. It is very interesting. How do you think, having heard such a story, how would you react? Because I think I would have just started apologizing and sympathizing. But this story makes me rethink this moment a little. But still, all people are different, everyone needs their own approach. It is really important for someone to hear words of compassion, and this is absolutely normal. After all, at the same time you do not belittle a person, but express your empathy, show that you are aware of the horror of the events that happened to him. And for someone, it is support that is needed. I am very interested in what you think about this, and in general, in principle, about this story. Therefore, I will be glad to read your reasoning in the comments.